All right, let's take a trip back in time. We're going to look at just one month that was sitting right on the razor's edge of history, February 1956.
Now, this wasn't just any old month. This was a moment when political tides were shifting, when sci-fi classics were being born, and, maybe most importantly, when rock and roll really started to rattle the windows of suburbia. It was a world of incredible contrasts, living in both serious black and white and dazzling technicolor at the exact same time.
So let's start with the serious side of things. In the world of the newsreels, the picture was, well, literally black and white. And the headlines, they were all about global politics and the simmering Cold War paranoia.
And in February of 1956, probably the single biggest question in all of America was a really simple one. Was the Ike era going to continue?
You see, after months of speculation, everybody was talking about it, following a massive heart attack he'd had, President Dwight D. Eisenhower finally put all the rumors to rest. On the very last day of the month, a leap day, he announced he was in fact going to seek a second term. The nation kind of breathed a collective sigh of relief, but that question about his health, it definitely lingered.
But here's where things get really fascinating. You have to look at the contrast. While America's entire focus was on one man's heartbeat, a political earthquake was literally shaking the foundations of the Soviet Union. At the 20th Party Congress, Nikita Khrushchev got up and delivered his now famous secret speech, a total, shocking denunciation of Joseph Stalin's brutal regime. The Cold War was, all of a sudden, entering a very strange and uncertain new phase.
And this superpower competition, it wasn't just political. Oh no, it was athletic too. The Winter Olympics had just wrapped up in Italy, and if you look at the final medal count, it tells a huge story. The Soviet Union, in their first ever appearance at the Winter Games, didn't just show up to compete. They completely dominated. They walked away with 16 medals, basically announcing their arrival as a new force on the world sporting stage.
Okay, so while the newsreels are filled with all this serious global stuff, the jukeboxes were telling a completely different story. This was a world that was just exploding with new sounds, new stars, and a totally new kind of energy. You could literally hear the culture shifting on the radio. At the top of the charts, he still had the smooth crooning of Dean Martin. But right on his heels was K-Star's Rock and Roll Waltz. And it was a signal that the old guard was starting to move to a very, very different and much louder beat. And while those charts were shifting, a full-on cultural hurricane was forming. This young singer named Elvis Presley had just released a little song called Heartbreak Hotel. By the end of February, he wasn't just another singer. He was on his way to becoming the face of this new, rebellious energy.
This split was just as clear if you went to the movies. Talk about a choice. On one screen, you had Invasion of the Body Snatchers, a chilling, black and white sci-fi film that perfectly tapped into all that Cold War paranoia. But right next door, you could escape into Carousel, the spectacular musical shot in the brand new, ultra-widescreen CinemaScope 55. Anxious reality or a Technicolor dream, you got to pick.
And of course, this wave of American pop culture wasn't stopping at the border. Up in Canada, while the newspapers were focused on the country's own post-war industrial boom, the CBC was beaming all this new music and energy right into people's living rooms. And Canadian teens who were feeling that same kind of economic optimism were quickly adopting the carefree independence of their American neighbors.
So, how do we make sense of all this? How do you tie it all together? Well, February 1956 really was a month caught between two totally different eras. It was a moment where the past and the future were just colliding in real time.
When you pull it all together, you see these incredible contrasts everywhere. You have the quiet caution of global politics right up against the loud rebellion of rock and roll. You have the deep anxiety of the Cold War clashing with the endless optimism of a post-war generation. It was the quiet, buttoned-up dignity of the early 50s giving way to the explosive change that was about to define the rest of the decade.
So in the end, February 1956 really was the calm before the storm, a fascinating, fleeting moment balanced perfectly between these black and white realities and these vibrant, technicolor dreams. And it kind of leaves you with the question, right? What other single months in history have held so many different futures all at once?